Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something that, well, for a lot of us, feels really fundamental in early learning: phonics.
Right. It's often seen as the starting point for reading. Non-negotiable, almost.
Exactly. Like, this is how kids learn to read, end of story. But today, we're actually exploring a much more, let's say, nuanced view.
A more compassionate one, I think, especially when we look at certain learners.
That's it. This deep dive is all about phonics, yes, but specifically for gestalt language processors, GLPs. We're leaning heavily on Dr. Jaime Hoerricks' work, Phonics, If You Must, a GLP procedural guide.
That title says a lot already, doesn't it? If you must.
It really does. And our goal here isn't to, throw phonics out entirely. It's about figuring out how it can be used differently, not as the strict gatekeeper.
Or more like light scaffolding. That's the term she uses, I believe.
Yes, light scaffolding, or even a guest in the learning journey. Something that serves the child, without squashing their natural joy in language. We want to unpack the when, the how, and the why for GLPs.
And what's really interesting is Dr. Hoerricks' own position. She talks about this doubleness. She's pretty critical, actually, of how phonics often becomes this boundary spell.
The checkpoint, yeah.
Right, forcing kids into a way of thinking that just doesn't match how GLPs naturally work with language. But even with her own resistance, she says, it's not my path. She's still provided this incredibly detailed map.
It's like she's saying, okay, I have reservations, serious ones, but if you are going down this road, here's how to do it carefully.
Exactly. With immense care and respect for the learner. It's that mischief she mentions, offering the guide even while cautioning us.
Okay, so let's get right into it. First step, understanding who these gestalt language processors are, and crucially, when phonics might even be relevant for them.
Okay, so GLPs. They learn language quite differently than, say, analytic processors. Analytic kids usually start small sounds, then words building up.
The typical way we think about it.
Right. But GLPs, they start big. They grab whole chunks, phrases, sentences, sometimes long scripts they've heard. Think like learning a whole song first, then maybe figuring out the verses or chorus later.
They absorb the whole melody before the individual notes.
Precisely. And only later do they start to break those big chunks down into smaller, more flexible parts.
That's a huge difference. So if they learn in wholes, how does something like phonics, which seems all about breaking things down into tiny sounds, ever fit? When's the right moment?
Well, Dr. Hoerricks is really clear on this. Phonics might, and I stress might, have a place, but only when a GLP is solidly in what's called stage 4 of their language development.
Stage 4. And that's not just a box to tick, is it?
No, not at all. She describes it beautifully as a lived texture. It's a feeling, a shift you can observe. Language starts to recombine under their own hands.
So those scripts they used to just echo.
Now they start bending and stretching them. They take fragments, shuffle them like cards, create new sentences. It feels playful, mischievous, alive.
They're not just repeating anymore. They're genuinely creating, experimenting with owning the language.
Exactly. Experimenting with ownership. That's the key phrase.
And there's a particular energy to watch for, right? Not about just doing what they're told.
Absolutely. It's this inward pulse of what if.
Yeah.
A real curiosity bubbling up from inside them. Not driven by worksheets or adult pressure. You see them weaving with language, rethreading scripts into something new, building coherence from within.
So that internal drive, that child-led impulse is everything.
Paramount. Phonics should only start if the impulse comes from them. You might see a child say, pause while writing and ask about a spelling, like why night doesn't sound like N-I-T-E.
Or they might notice rhyming words themselves.
Yes. Giggle because cat and hat look similar at the end. Or just fiercely want to write a favorite line all by themselves. Those are the signs. Organic signals of readiness.
And pushing before that, what are the risks?
Oh, they're significant. Dr. Hoerricks warns it can rupture the flow. It turns their natural play with language into scrutiny. It breaks the coherence they're just starting to build. It can actually set them back.
Wow. So the absolute rule is child first. Respect their timing.
Exactly. Let that curiosity lead the way. Don't force it.
Okay, but that leads to a practical question. If we can't just use standard phonics checklists, how do we assess this readiness? How do we know?
That's where this idea of hospitality and intake and assessment comes in. It's a lovely concept. Instead of clipboards and tests.
Like you're checking them off.
Right. Instead, it's like meeting a new friend. The main goal is just to listen deeply. Notice what makes their eyes light up, what makes them withdraw or seem dim, what sparks their interest.
It's about welcoming them, not testing them.
Perfectly put. welcoming them into the process.
So for family interviews, it's less about collecting data points.
Much less. It's story, not data first. You ask questions like, how does language live in your child's world? You try to understand, is that line they say pure mimicry of a favorite show, or are they actually starting to break it down and use parts flexibly?
You're honoring the family's perspective.
Yes, receiving their stories as the first and truest data. Building that trust, that understanding, it's foundational.
What about things like nonsense word probes? Those seem pretty standard in phonics assessments. How do they fit here, if at all?
Well, if they're used, and that's a big if, they have to be reframed completely. Not as a test or a trap, but as a game, like a riddle around a fire.
Okay, how would that work?
Maybe you see if they can playfully extend a pattern. You say cat, hat. Maybe see if they enjoy playing with a made-up word like lat. You're looking for that gleam in the eye. Maybe laughter.
Not frustration or turning away.
Exactly. If they frown or shut down, that tells you something important too.
Yeah.
It has to be light, playful, never high stakes. Always about joy and engagement first.
That feels much more respectful. And this leads to dynamic assessment, those living metrics you mentioned. What does that look like in practice?
It's about constantly watching the child's energy, their prosody, the music and rhythm in their voice, which is so important for GLPs, their affect, their emotional state, and their regulation. Are they calm, engaged, or getting tense and fidgety?
So you're reading their whole being, not just their answers.
Precisely. If their voice flattens, if you see tension building, if their thinking seems to fall apart, what she calls coherence collapses, you must stop.
And you tell them.
Yes, crucially, you narrate it. Hey, I noticed your words got quieter there. Thanks for showing me. Let's pause this and go back to that line you really love. It makes the whole process co-regulated, relational, responsive. It's a partnership.
That's a powerful shift. Okay, so let's say the child is showing that readiness, that internal spark. How do we make sure any phonics we introduce stays affirming, this soft feet approach?
Right. Walk on soft feet. That's the core image. Phonics has to stay in a supporting role. It should never colonize the whole stage, meaning it can't take over everything.
It's a helper, not the boss.
Exactly. Keep it light, keep it safe, and always anchor it in meaning the child already cares about.
And a key part of that is meaning first, microdose next,
Yep.
so keep it short.
Very short. Any phonics work has to be brief, woven into the fabric of something the child already loves, like a line from a favorite book or song.
How brief are we talking?
5 minutes, 10 at most. Seriously. Then right back into the flow of meaningful language. The warning is clear. If phonics becomes the main event, the gestalt shatters. You lose the very thing you're trying to support.
And this next point seems absolutely vital for GLPs. Chunk atom, start bigger.
Yes, because remember, they live in wholes than in parts. So forget drilling isolated sounds, especially at first. It's much better to start with bigger, meaningful units.
Like
Things like rhymes, the ending part of words like right and light and bright, or morphemes, those smallest bits that carry meaning, like ing, or prefixes like iren and un, or even whole rhyme families drawn from scripts they love.
because those bigger pieces still hold meaning for them. They preserve coherence.
Exactly. It aligns with how their brains are already working with language while still giving them some useful print information.
That makes so much sense. And the guide also talks about using prosody preserving tools, keeping the music alive.
Yes, because, as she puts it, if the rhythm dies, the learning dies with it. Any tools we use have to honor that natural music and flow of language.
Like Elkonin boxes, those little sound boxes.
Right, but maybe use them for bigger chunks like syllables or rhymes, mapping sounds onto parts of words they already feel and know, rather than forcing them to isolate tiny sounds they might not perceive yet. Or maybe color-coding vowels in a way that matches the stress or rhythm they hear.
And things like minimal pairs, cat cap.
Use them sparingly, only if it helps clarify meaning, like, oh, you meant cat, not cap. Not for endless sterile drills. The question always has to be, does this keep the language alive and meaningful?
Another really important guardrail, dialect awareness.
Crucial. A child's natural way of speaking, their dialect, is not an error to be corrected. It's the very ground of their voice.
So phonics instruction needs to adapt to them.
Absolutely. Phonics must bend to the child, not the other way around. Otherwise, you risk messing with their understanding and even their sense of who they are. It's about supporting literacy within their linguistic world.
Okay, and the last guardrail mention is framing it using self-directed strategy development, or SRSD. What does that look like?
It means you teach phonics not as a rigid rule, but as a small, concrete strategy. Maybe you show them how to look for the ing ending, you model it once, try it together briefly, then you let it go.
So they choose when to use it.
Exactly. It becomes a tool they can choose to pick up. You might even give them self-talk prompts like, I noticed this part, I can try this. Did it work? Okay, I'm done. It empowers them. Phonics becomes their tool, not just another adult demand.
This is also thoughtful. Can we talk about some specific examples? What do these small gestures look like in action?
Sure. One she calls orthographic glossing. Let's say a child loves the phrase, the moon shone bright. After reading it together, you might gently underline the "ite" rhyme in bright.
Just point it out visually?
Right. Briefly explain the sound, maybe link it to a visual like a glowing sun, mention how it feels in your mouth. And then this is key, invite the child to reuse that sound pattern in another word they know or want to make up.
So it's an annotation, a gentle connection, not a drill.
Exactly. Connecting the look, the sound, the meaning, the feeling, all linked to something they already care about.
And morpheme-first decoding, that sounds like it follows the chunk atom idea directly.
It does. Instead of starting with B-R-I-G-H-T, you focus on meaningful chunks first if they exist in the word. Things like ing, in. These carry both sound and sense.
They're not just sounds, they mean something.
Right, they're like meaningful spines in the words. It gives the child print power without totally stripping away the coherence they rely on. Helps them get to the meaning faster.
I really like the sound of rhyme families from scripts. How is that different from a standard rhyming lesson?
The difference is the starting point. It must come from language the child already loves and uses. So if light is in a favorite script,
You build from there.
yes, you create a small family around it, maybe bright, night, and you perform it, maybe as a little chant. You're connecting the sounds playfully, but always anchored in the rhythm and meaning they already value. It's making the phonics connection feel natural and fun, not arbitrary.
That sounds much more engaging. And dictation from scripts, how does that foster independence?
It's a lovely stepping stone. First, you write down a line the child really treasures. Then, you might just tag one or two little details on the written version, circle an ing, maybe underline a rhyme they're noticing.
Just a little nudge.
Exactly. So the next time they want to write that line, maybe they can do it themselves using your model as a reference. It builds their autonomy step by step without overwhelming them with decoding every single sound from scratch. It's like offering a supportive handhold.
And woven through all of this is the need to watch for those pullback signals. Remind us what those look like again, that joy draining.
Yeah, it's about constantly tuning into their energy. If that musical prosody in their voice flattens out, if they start getting dysregulated, fidgety, looking away, getting tense, or if that spark, that joy, just visibly drains from their face.
You stop immediately.
Immediately. These aren't minor things. Dr. Hoerricks says they are the gestalt itself telling us the zoom has gone too far. If a child was just happily engaged and suddenly goes quiet, avoids eye contact, pushes the materials away, that's your non-negotiable sign to pull back.
Which brings us to the really clear boundaries. When should phonics absolutely not be used? The red lines.
Okay, first is the developmental red line. Phonics is a definite no-go in stage 3 or those very early, fragile bits of stage 4.
Why is that?
Because at that point, their language structure, those scripts, are still like wet clay. Trying to dissect them doesn't reveal details, it just causes collapse. What looks like resistance from the child is actually self-protection. Their system just isn't ready for that kind of analysis.
That makes sense. The second red line seems to be about our reasons for doing it.
Yes, the intent red line. You don't use Phonics just for compliance. Not to check a box on an IEP, not to satisfy an administrator, not just to boost fluency scores or get them to pass nonsense word drills.
Because that reduces language, too.
A performance.
Yeah.
A performance for others, stripping it of meaning. It undermines their ownership and can feel like surveillance, not support.
And the final, maybe most important red line.
The joy red line. This is the big one. If introducing phonics flattens prosody, silences laughter, interrupts their writing flow, or leaves the child dysregulated, you've crossed the line, period.
The presence of joy is not ornamental. It is diagnostic. I love that quote.
It's powerful, isn't it? If the joy disappears, if the music fades from their language, the intervention, however well-intentioned, is causing harm. That's your absolute stop sign.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. Thinking about the bigger picture. What does all this imply for how professionals work together? The guide talks about moving beyond silos.
Yeah, this is a really important part. Dr. Hoerricks shares her own sense of loneliness sometimes, being an ODHD GLP teacher herself, feeling like she's constantly translating between different professional worlds. She's quite critical of that artificial border we often have between teachers and speech-language therapists.
Because they hold different pieces of the puzzle.
Exactly. Teachers understand the messy ecology of classroom life, the social dynamics, the routines, how kids use language to belong. SLTs or SLPs bring that deep attunement to prosody, articulation, the oral motor rhythms of speech.
So when they do manage to connect,
Magic can happen. Interventions stop being unilateral prescriptions, things handed down from on high, and they become mutual practices. They're co-authored, grounded in the child's actual context, and truly accountable to what the child wants and needs.
but that collaboration isn't always easy in our current
No,
systems.
it's often not supported. We need practical changes, like protected co-planning time, models where a therapist can actually observe in the classroom context. And she'd even suggest apprenticeship pathways for GLP individuals themselves to enter these helping professions, valuing their unique learning histories.
And on a bigger scale, policy changes.
Yes, we need policy language that recognizes gestalt pathways as legitimate trajectories of literacy. That way, funding and curriculum development can actually support this diversity instead of implicitly or explicitly pushing everyone towards one analytic model.
There's also a point about morale, about the impact of past therapies on GLP individuals.
Right. Many have felt traumatized by approaches focused on fixing them. So Dr. Hoerricks calls for reparative entry points into these fields, ways to welcome GLP individuals and recognize their way of being, their gestalt perspective, as a real asset, not a deficit.
It sounds like the core message is an invitation to refuse the border.
Absolutely. Start small, she suggests. Invite a colleague in to observe, share a child's favorite script and talk about it together. Just dedicate 15 minutes for joint reflection on a case. Advocate for paperwork that asks simple but profound questions like, does the child actually want this intervention? And what might it cost them in terms of joy?
It all comes back to centering the child.
Always. The real heart of this whole deep dive, I think, is about sovereignty. The child's sovereignty over their own language and learning. If phonics comes into the picture at all, it has to be that optional scaffolding.
Something light, temporary, like a side rail you use for a bit, then let go of.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Because the primary goal must be protecting their coherence, their way of making sense. GLPs deserve to grow into language without having their joy splintered for the sake of compliance.
Insisting on drills before they're ready, it mistakes standardization for safety, you could say.
Or sovereignty for submission. The work has to constantly recenter the gestalt, the whole experience that carries their story, their prosody, their sense of belonging.
This really is much bigger than just phonics, isn't it? It's a call for a whole different ecology of practice.
It really is. One where teachers and therapists break down those silos, where knowledge flows back and forth, where assessment is genuinely relational, and where fundamentally joy is protected as fiercely as accuracy.
So as we wrap up, here's something for you, our listeners, to think about. What if true literacy isn't just about how well someone can break language down, but about how whole and joyful they feel using it? How might embracing these different pathways, like the Gestalt way, enrich our understanding of learning itself? Maybe closer to home. What does it mean for you to protect joy and coherence in your own learning, your own communication, maybe even pushing back against external expectations sometimes?